He never planned to become a father. For most of his life, he believed that some people were simply not meant to have families of their own. He was one of those people who lived quietly, worked hard, paid his bills on time, and went to sleep early because there was nothing waiting for him outside. His small rented house stayed silent year after year. No laughter echoed in the rooms. No toys cluttered the floor. No photos filled the walls. Just clean spaces, careful routines, and a man who had learned how to live without expecting much. He worked long hours at a repair workshop on the edge of town. The pay was steady but small. Enough to survive, never enough to dream. He fixed engines, replaced broken parts, and helped other people get back on the road. Every evening, he washed the oil from his hands, ate a simple meal, and sat alone with the radio on low volume. He told himself this was peace, and maybe it was. But sometimes late at night, the silence felt heavy. One winter evening, everything changed because of a single phone call. A social worker had found his number through an old application he once filled out years earlier, more out of curiosity than hope. At the time, he had walked into the office, listened to the long explanations, and signed forms without expecting anything to come from it. He assumed no one would ever call him back. Single men were rarely chosen. People like him were considered risky, unstable, or incomplete. But that night, the social worker spoke gently and carefully. There were 2 children, siblings. They had been moved from home to home for years. No one wanted to take them together. One was already considered too old to adopt. The younger one barely spoke anymore. They needed a place, even if it was temporary. He asked for time to think, though his heart already knew the answer. He spent the night walking through his house, sitting on the edge of the bed, staring at the empty chairs by the table. By morning, he called back and said yes. The first day they arrived, they stood close to each other at the doorway. The boy positioned himself slightly in front, like a shield. His shoulders were tense, his eyes watchful. The girl clutched a worn backpack with both hands, her face lowered, as if expecting someone to take it away. They did not smile. They did not speak. He knelt down slowly so he would not seem tall or threatening. He spoke softly, telling them they were safe, that they could stay as long as they needed. The boy nodded once, but did not answer. The girl hid behind him. The first weeks were hard. The children barely ate. They flinched at sudden sounds. The boy woke up from nightmares and refused to talk about them. The girl lined up her belongings every night, ready to leave at a moment's notice. They had learned that nothing lasted. He did not force them to open up. He did not ask many questions. Instead, he showed them consistency. Breakfast was always ready. Dinner was always warm. If they broke something, he fixed it without anger. If they made mistakes, he corrected them calmly. Slowly, the walls began to crack. The girl started speaking in short sentences. The boy began helping around the house, fixing small things without being asked. Trust arrived quietly, not all at once, but in tiny pieces. Months passed. Then years. Paperwork turned temporary care into permanent adoption. The day it became official, the boy stood very still, his jaw tight, as if afraid to react too soon. The girl smiled openly for the first time, her eyes shining with disbelief. He told them they were his children now, forever. The boy looked away quickly, but later that night, he quietly left a note on the kitchen table that said thank you. Life was not easy after that. Raising 2 children on a limited income required sacrifices. He gave up his personal comforts without complaint. New clothes for them mattered more than new shoes for him. School supplies came before repairs around the house. When the workshop cut hours, he picked up extra jobs wherever he could. He never told them no unless he had to. And when he did, he explained why. He attended school meetings, even when he felt out of place among other parents. He sat through performances, clapping louder than anyone else. When the boy struggled with anger, he listened instead of punishing. When the girl struggled with confidence, he reminded her of her strength. They grew. The boy became quiet but steady, learning skills quickly, working part-time jobs as soon as he was allowed. The girl became thoughtful and creative, noticing details others missed. Both of them carried the past in their own ways. But they also carried gratitude. They noticed things about their father that he never mentioned. They noticed how he walked to work on rainy days because his old car had finally broken down for good. They noticed how he delayed doctor visits. They noticed how he wore the same jacket year after year. They noticed how he smiled easily but rarely bought anything for himself. He never complained. If they asked, he said he had everything he needed. Time moved on. As it always does, the boy finished school and went straight to work. The girl followed soon after. They did not earn much, but they earned honestly. They helped with bills. They repaired the house little by little. The father aged quietly, his hair turning gray at the edges, his hands growing rougher. One evening, while sitting at the small kitchen table, the siblings exchanged a look. It was not planned. No words were spoken at first, but both of them were thinking the same thing. Their father needed a car, not a new one. Not a fancy one. Just something reliable enough so he would not have to walk long distances anymore. Something that would make his life a little easier. They knew their savings were small. They knew their options were limited. But they also knew what he had given up for them. They began putting money aside quietly, skipping meals out, working extra hours, saying no to things they wanted. The plan stayed secret. Every time their father mentioned the long walk to work, they felt both pain and determination. Months passed. One afternoon, they found an old car listed for sale on the edge of town. It was cheap, too cheap. The paint was scratched. The doors were uneven. The engine sounded tired, but it still ran. They looked at each other, uncertainty heavy in their chests. This was all they could afford. They bought it as they stood there. Staring at the damaged car, doubts crept in. Would he feel embarrassed? Would he think they wasted their money? Would he feel burdened instead of grateful? Still, they reminded themselves why they were doing this. They drove the car home carefully, praying it would not break down before reaching the house. It rattled loudly, as if protesting every mile. That night, they could barely sleep. The next morning, they stood outside with their father. Their hands shook slightly as they handed him the keys. They explained it was not much. They apologized before he could even react. He stared at the car for a long moment, his face unreadable. Then he smiled. Not the polite smile he gave strangers. Not the small smile he wore when pretending everything was fine, but a deep, genuine smile that reached his eyes. He thanked them. He hugged them both. He told them it was perfect. The siblings exhaled in relief. Though something inside them still felt uncertain, none of them knew that this damaged old car carried more than just rust and noise. None of them knew that it would soon uncover something that would change all their lives forever. The car became part of their daily life faster than anyone expected. Every morning, the father stepped outside a little earlier than usual, keys in hand, just to look at it. He never said anything negative about the scratches or the dents. If anything, he treated it with a kind of careful respect, as if it were more fragile than it really was. He wiped the dust from the hood with his sleeve before starting the engine, listening closely to the sound it made. The way a doctor listens to a heartbeat, the first drive to work felt strange to him. He had walked that road for years. He knew every crack in the pavement, every shortcut through narrow streets. Sitting behind the wheel again reminded him of another time in his life, long before responsibility shaped every choice. The engine rattled, the steering felt loose, and the brakes complained loudly. But the car moved forward. And that alone felt like a gift. At the workshop, coworkers noticed immediately. Some raised their eyebrows. Others joked lightly about the car's condition. One of them laughed and said it looked like it barely survived a war. The father smiled and nodded, brushing off the comments. He had learned long ago that pride was not worth much. What mattered was that he no longer arrived tired from walking miles before the workday even began. During lunch breaks, he found himself thinking about the children more than usual. About how they must have planned this quietly. About how much effort it must have taken for them to save the money. The thought sat heavy in his chest, not as guilt, but as something closer to awe. He wondered when they had grown so much, when they had become people who thought of others before themselves. That evening, he decided to check the car more carefully. Not because he distrusted it, but because fixing things was what he did best. It was how he showed care. He pulled it into the small space beside the house and opened the hood. The engine was old, but familiar. He tightened a loose bolt, replaced a worn belt he had lying around, and cleaned what he could. As he worked, memories surfaced. Long nights fixing broken things so the children would not feel the weight of money problems. Quiet repairs done after they were asleep. He realized that this car, damaged as it was, felt strangely similar to the life they had built together. Not perfect. A little rough. But still moving forward? A few days later, a problem appeared. A strange noise from the back of the car, faint at first, then more noticeable. It sounded hollow, like something loose that should not be there. At first, he ignored it. Old cars made many sounds, but the noise returned every time he drove over a bump. One evening, after dinner, he mentioned it casually. The siblings exchanged quick glances, worry flashing across their faces. They asked if it was serious. He told them it was probably nothing, just age catching up with the car. Still, their reactions stayed with him. Later that night, when the house was quiet, he went outside with a flashlight. He checked under the car, tapped along the metal, listened closely. The sound seemed to come from the back, near the trunk. He opened it and examined everything inside. It was mostly empty, just a spare tire and old lining that looked newer than expected. That caught his attention. The trunk lining did not match the rest of the car. The fabric was cleaner, the fasteners newer. Someone had replaced it at some point. He pressed gently against the side panel and felt resistance where there should have been space. He frowned, curiosity waking up. He did not open anything that night. Something about it felt deliberate, as if the car carried a story that was not ready to be told yet. He closed the trunk and went inside, but sleep did not come easily. The next few days, the noise continued. It became impossible to ignore. Each time he heard it, he felt the same pull of curiosity mixed with unease. He had seen many things hidden inside old vehicles during his years at the workshop, some harmless, some not. He decided to wait for the weekend. Saturday morning arrived with clear skies and quiet streets. The siblings were both at work, unaware of what was occupying his thoughts. He rolled the car out into better light and began a careful inspection. He removed screws one by one, placing them neatly aside. His hands moved with confidence, but his mind raced. Behind the side panel, he found something unexpected. A sealed compartment, poorly concealed, but intentionally hidden. His breath slowed. For a moment, he considered stopping, putting everything back the way it was and pretending he never noticed, but he had lived a life built on facing things directly. Running away was not who he was. He opened it. Inside were several items wrapped tightly in old cloth and plastic. He did not touch them right away. He simply stared, heart pounding. This was more than forgotten tools or random junk. This was something someone had gone to effort to hide carefully. He unwrapped the first bundle. His hands began to shake. What he saw triggered a memory he had buried so deeply that he had almost convinced himself it never mattered. A document. Old, but still legible. Official. His name was printed on it. He sat down heavily on the ground years ago. Before the children entered his life, he had been offered a chance. A risky business deal involving a small transport operation. It could have changed his future completely. But it required time, travel, and money. It required a kind of freedom he no longer had once the children arrived. He had walked away without hesitation back then. Some opportunities were not worth the cost. He remembered signing papers, handing them over, letting go. And yet here it was. Not just the document, but other items connected to that same chapter of his life. Things he believed were long gone, lost forever. Questions flooded his mind. How did these end up here? Who placed them in this car? And why now? He wrapped everything back carefully and closed the compartment. His heart was racing, but his face was calm. He stood there for a long time, staring at the car, seeing it differently now. That evening, he said nothing to the siblings. He listened as they talked about their day. He smiled, laughed at the right moments, kept the discovery locked inside his chest. That night, sleep refused to come. He lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying his life choices. He thought about the man he might have become if he had chosen differently. And then he thought about the life he actually lived. The children he raised, the quiet dinners, the sacrifices for the first time. He wondered if life was trying to speak to him. The car noise no longer sounded like a problem. It sounded like a message by morning. He knew one thing for certain. Whatever was hidden inside that car was not an accident. And whatever it meant, it was tied to the children standing beside him. Unaware that they're imperfect, Gift had reopened a door he believed was closed forever. The truth was still unfolding. And it was far bigger than any of them could imagine. The days after the discovery passed slowly, as if time itself had decided to be careful. The father went to work as usual, drove the same roads, greeted the same people, but inside him something had shifted. The car no longer felt like just a machine. It felt like a question following him everywhere he went. He did not touch the hidden compartment again right away. He needed space to think. Every night after dinner, he sat quietly, listening to the familiar sounds of the house. The soft steps of the siblings moving through the rooms. The hum of old appliances. The calm that had once been enough for him. Now, memories kept returning without warning. He remembered the man he used to be before. Responsibility changed his path. Younger, restless, always thinking ahead. Back then, he believed hard work alone could fix everything. He believed life would wait for him. The offer had come unexpectedly in those days. A small transport partnership. Nothing grand, but promising. A chance to own a few vehicles, manage routes, slowly grow something of his own. He had spent nights reading documents, imagining what could be built over time. Then the call about the children came. He remembered holding the papers in his hands, feeling the weight of the choice before him. He could not do both. The children needed stability, not a man constantly traveling or risking money. So he chose without regret. Or so he thought. Now, seeing those documents again stirred emotions he had never allowed himself to feel. At the workshop he made small mistakes. Nothing serious, but enough to draw attention. A coworker asked if he was feeling all right. He nodded and smiled, saying he was just tired. It was easier than explaining something he barely understood himself. The siblings noticed. 2. The girl asked if he was sleeping well. The boy offered to help more around the house. Their concern touched him deeply. It reminded him why he had made the choice he did. One evening, he finally took the car back into the small space beside the house. He waited until the lights were off inside, not because he wanted to hide anything, but because he needed silence. He opened the compartment again. This time, he examined everything carefully. The documents were older than he first realized, but still valid. Along with them were items that showed effort, planning, and time. Someone had protected these things. Someone had believed they still mattered. He sat on the ground for a long time, papers spread out beside him. The air was cool, the sky dark. He felt small and very human in that moment. Questions pressed harder now. How did these things return to him after so many years? Why through this car? And why now, when his life felt settled? He thought about coincidence. He had never believed much in it. The next day he did something he had not done in years. He visited an old office on the other side of town. The place looked smaller than he remembered. The sign was faded. Inside, a tired clerk searched through records slowly. The answer came quietly. The deal had not disappeared. It had grown. What he once stepped away from had become something far bigger than he ever imagined. Vehicles had multiplied. Routes had expanded. Ownership shares had changed hands. And somehow, his name was still there. Tied to the original agreement, he left the office in shock. The weight of the information settled heavily on him during the drive home. His hands tightened on the steering wheel. The car rattled as usual, unaware of the storm it carried. At home, he sat at the kitchen table long after dinner. The siblings watched him carefully. Finally, he told them he needed to share something important. He did not start with money. He did not start with documents. He started with the truth. He told them about the choice he made years ago, about the opportunity he walked away from, about why he did it. He spoke slowly, honestly, leaving nothing out. His voice shook when he talked about fear. Fear of failing them. Fear of becoming absent. The siblings listened without interrupting. When he finished, the room was quiet. The girl was the first to speak. She told him she never once felt like a burden. The boy said that everything good in his life came from the day he walked through that door. Tears filled the father's eyes. Then he showed them the documents. They stared at the papers, confused at first. Then realization spread slowly across their faces. This damaged old car had carried back a part of his life he never expected to see again. The boy asked if this meant things could change. The father answered honestly. He did not know. That night, none of them slept much. In the days that followed, calls were made. Meetings were scheduled. The truth became clearer with each conversation. What once seemed small had become valuable, life-changing even. But with that realization came another question. What would they do with it? The father felt torn. Accepting what was rightfully his felt strange, almost undeserved. He had built a life around having little, around being careful. The siblings saw it differently. They reminded him of every sacrifice. Every night he went without. Every dream he set aside. To them, this was not luck. It was fairness finally catching up. Still, doubt lingered. He took long walks, thinking deeply. He drove the car slowly, listening to its familiar sounds. He realized that the damaged car was no longer embarrassing or ugly to him. It was honest. It carried history, choices, consequences. One afternoon, he returned home and sat down with the siblings. His decision was calm and clear. Whatever came next, they would face it together, not as a man chasing wealth, but as a father who never stopped choosing his children. Outside, the old car rested quietly. Its work was not finished yet. The days that followed felt heavier than any the father had known before. Not because of fear, but because of choice. For most of his life, choices had been simple. Work or rest. Spend or save. Say yes or no. This was different. This choice touched every part of who he was and everything he had. Built with his own hands. The siblings noticed how quiet he became. He still cooked meals, still asked about their days, still listened. But his mind often drifted elsewhere. Sometimes he would stop mid-sentence, stare at nothing for a moment, then continue as if nothing had happened. They did not push him. They had learned patience from him. One evening, the boy suggested they sit together after dinner. Not to talk about papers or money, but to talk about the future. The father agreed. They moved to the small living room where the couch had been repaired more times than he could remember. The boy spoke first. He said he knew his father feared change. He said he understood why. Life had never given them much room for mistakes. One wrong step could undo everything. But he also said that sometimes holding on too tightly could hurt just as much as letting go. The girl listened quietly, then added her own thoughts. She said she had always believed their father was meant for more than survival, that his kindness, patience, and skill were wasted on just getting by. She reminded him that this opportunity had not appeared randomly. It had come back to him through love. The father said nothing at first. He looked at their faces, now grown, strong, steady. He remembered the scared children at his door years ago. He felt pride rise in his chest, mixed with fear. That night, he made a decision, though he did not announce it yet. He decided to learn everything before choosing anything. The following weeks were filled with meetings, phone calls, and paperwork. Each conversation revealed more details. The small transport deal he once walked away from had grown into a solid operation. Not massive, but stable, profitable. Respected his share, though untouched for years, had value. Real value. enough to change their lives if he chose to claim it. Still, he hesitated. He worried about greed, about losing himself, about becoming someone his children would not recognize. Money had ruined many good people he had known. He had built his identity around humility and restraint. What would happen if that balance broke? One afternoon, while driving home, the old car stalled briefly at a traffic light. Panic surged, then faded as the engine recovered. He laughed quietly to himself. Even now, the car reminded him that nothing was guaranteed. That night, he finally told the siblings. What he had decided, he would move forward, but not blindly. He would claim what was rightfully his, but only if it could serve their family, not control it. There would be rules, limits, safeguards. The siblings agreed instantly. Relief washed over them, not because of money, but because he was no longer carrying the burden alone. Changes came slowly at first. He reduced his hours at the workshop, not because he wanted to quit, but because he needed time to understand his new responsibilities. His coworkers were surprised, but supportive. Many had watched him struggle quietly for years. They believed he deserved some ease. At home, small improvements began. A leaking pipe was replaced properly. Old furniture was repaired instead of patched. The refrigerator stopped making that awful noise. None of it was extravagant. Just necessary. The father insisted on one thing above all else. The siblings would continue working. No shortcuts. No dependence. He did not want money to weaken them. They respected that. As weeks passed, the weight on his shoulders shifted. It did not disappear, but it changed shape. Instead of constant worry, there was responsibility mixed with hope. Then came the moment he feared most. Someone from the transport, KOHN, suggested expanding. More vehicles. More reward. The father said no, not because he lacked courage, but because he understood limits. He had learned the value of enough. That decision surprised many. It earned respect. At home, the siblings celebrated quietly, not with parties or purchases, but with a shared meal and laughter that felt lighter than it had in years. One evening, the father stood outside, looking at the damaged old car. It had not changed much. Still scratched, still loud, still imperfect. But to him, it had become something else. It was proof. Proof that love given freely returns in ways no one can predict. Proof that sacrifice does not erase opportunity. It reshapes it. He remembered the embarrassment he thought the gift might bring. How wrong he had been. The car had given him back more than mobility. It had returned dignity, possibility, and closure. The siblings joined him outside. They stood together, silent, understanding without words. The girl placed her hand on the car lightly. She said she was glad they bought this one, and not a better one. The father smiled, knowing exactly what she meant. Nothing shiny could have carried what this car did. As night fell, the house felt warmer than it ever had. The journey was not over, but for the first time. The future did not feel heavy. It felt shared. The change did not arrive all at once. It came quietly in small moments that were easy to miss if one was not paying attention. The father still woke up early. He still made tea the same way. He still fixed things around the house with his own hands, even when others offered help. But inside him, something had settled. A question that once caused fear now brought clarity. The siblings felt it too. The house felt different. Not louder, not bigger, but calmer. As if a long-held breath had finally been released. Conversations flowed more easily. Laughter came without effort. Even silence felt comfortable again. The father kept his promise. He did not chase more than he needed. He claimed what was rightfully his, arranged everything carefully, and made sure nothing threatened the life they had built together. He did not quit the workshop entirely. He reduced his hours further, choosing balance over pride. Fixing things had always grounded him. People around him noticed the change. Not the money, but the ease. His shoulders were no longer constantly tense. His smile lasted longer. When asked about it, he simply said, "Life had been kind lately." One evening, the siblings brought up something they had been thinking about for a while. They asked what he wanted now. Not what he needed, not what was practical, but what he wanted. The question caught him off guard. He sat quietly, searching himself. For so long, want had not been part of his vocabulary. Survival left little room for it. After a long pause, he said he wanted time. Time with them. Time without worry. Time to rest his hands and his heart. They smiled, knowing they had already given him that. Weeks passed. Then months. The old car continued to serve its purpose. It never became perfect. It broke down once on a quiet road, forcing the father to laugh at the irony of it all. The siblings arrived to help, teasing him gently as they pushed it aside. It was repaired again, just enough. One afternoon, while cleaning the car together, they found nothing new hidden inside. No more documents. No more surprises. And that felt right. The car had already given what it needed to give. The father often thought about the path his life had taken, about how easily things could have gone differently, about how close he came to a future where he was wealthy but alone. The thought no longer frightened him. It reminded him of the value of what he had chosen. One day, a letter arrived. Simple. Formal. It confirmed everything was settled. No loose ends. No uncertainty left. He read it once, then folded it carefully and placed it in a drawer. That night, the siblings cooked dinner together. Nothing fancy. Just familiar food, shared stories, and quiet gratitude. After the meal, the father stood up and cleared his throat. He told them there was something he wanted to say. He thanked them, not just for the car, but for seeing him, for noticing his struggles when he tried to hide them, for loving him the way he had loved them. He told them that the damaged old car had taught him something important, that gifts did not need to be perfect to be powerful, that love often arrived wrapped in things others might overlook. The siblings listened, eyes shining. The boys said that when they bought the car, they felt embarrassed, that they worried it was not enough, that people would laugh. He admitted they almost gave up on the idea. The girl added that they bought it anyway, because they believed their father would see the intention, not the damage he did. The father stood, walked over, and hugged them both. He held on longer than usual. In that moment, the past, the present, and the future felt aligned. Outside, the car rested quietly, its scratches catching the soft light from the window. Life continued. The siblings moved forward in their own paths, always staying close. The father remained the steady center of their lives, not because he had money now, but because he had always been their home. Sometimes neighbors asked about the car, why he kept it when he could afford something better. He always smiled and said it still worked. But the truth was deeper. That car carried the proof of a life lived with purpose. Years later, when the father grew older and his hands shook more than they used to, the siblings were there. They helped him the way he once helped them. The roles shifted naturally, without resentment or regret. On quiet evenings, they would sit together, watching the sky darken. Sometimes they spoke, sometimes they didn't, and every now and then, the father would glance at the car and feel grateful. Not for what it brought him back, but for reminding him of what he never lost: family. The end did not come with noise or celebration. It came with peace. Life did not stop after everything settled. It rarely does. It simply moved into a slower, steadier rhythm. The father learned that peace was not the absence of problems, but the confidence that whatever came next could be handled together. The house became a place where people felt welcome. Neighbors stopped by more often. Old friends reappeared. Not because of money, but because the father finally allowed himself to be present without worry pulling him away. He listened more. He laughed more. He rested when his body asked him to. The siblings noticed how their father had changed in small ways. He no longer rushed through meals. He took longer walks. Sometimes he sat quietly on the porch, watching the street, as if memorizing ordinary moments he once rushed past. One afternoon, the girl asked him if he ever regretted anything. The question lingered in the air. He thought carefully before answering. He said regret was tricky. It could grow endlessly if fed. He admitted there were moments in his life he wished were easier, but none he wished away. Every hard choice had shaped who they were. The boy nodded. He understood that more than he let on. The old car continued to age alongside them. Its paint faded further. New sounds appeared. But the father refused to replace it. Not out of stubbornness, but because it still had a purpose. It reminded him daily of how unexpected life could be. One day, the siblings surprised him again. This time, not with an object, but with an idea. They suggested turning part of the workshop space he owned into a small training area. A place where young people could learn basic repair skills. Nothing official. Nothing complicated at first. He hesitated. Responsibility had taught him caution, but the idea stayed with him. He remembered how lost he felt when he was younger. How much it would have meant to have someone patient enough to teach without judgment. He agreed to try. The first few weeks were awkward. Only one young person showed up. Then two, then a few more. The father taught slowly, explaining not just how things worked, but why they mattered. He taught respect for tools, for effort, for honesty. The siblings watched proudly from a distance. This was their father at his best. The space grew warmer, filled with conversation and shared learning. No money changed hands. The reward was different. One evening, after everyone left, the father sat alone in the workshop. He looked around and felt something close to fulfillment, not because of success, but because of purpose. Later that night, he drove the old car home slowly. The road was quiet, the sky clear. He felt content. At home, the siblings were waiting. They had prepared dinner together. They talked late into the night, sharing memories they had never spoken about before. Painful ones. Happy ones. All of it. The father realized then that their bond had moved beyond gratitude. It had become partnership. Years passed. Gently, the father grew older. His steps slowed. His hands shook more. The siblings stepped in naturally, without being asked. Care flowed in the opposite direction now. One evening, the father asked to sit in the car one last time. Just to listen to the engine. Just to feel it. They sat together, smiling softly. The car did not start that night, and somehow it felt right. The father rested his head back and closed his eyes. He was at peace. The car that once carried a hidden past had now completed its journey, and so had he. Time moved forward in the way it always does, quietly and without asking permission. After that night, when the old car refused to start, life did not suddenly end or change in a dramatic way. It simply slowed. The father rested more. He spoke less. But when he did, his words carried weight. The siblings adjusted their lives without discussion. One stayed closer to home. The other checked in daily. Care did not feel like duty. It felt natural, like breathing. The father spent more time sitting near the window, watching the world outside. Children walked past on their way to school. Neighbors waved. The seasons changed one after another, steady and patient. He noticed things he once rushed by. The way light shifted across the floor. The sound of birds early in the morning. The comfort of familiar silence. Sometimes he asked about the workshop. About the young people still coming to learn. The siblings told him everything. How the space had become a place of trust. How people stayed after lessons just to talk. How his way of teaching had left a mark. He listened with a quiet smile. One afternoon, he asked to see the car again. Not to drive it, just to sit beside it. The siblings helped him outside. He rested his hand on the hood, feeling the rough paint beneath his fingers. He said he was glad they never replaced it to others. It was just an old, damaged thing. To him, it was a reminder that life did not need to be perfect to be meaningful. As days passed, the father spoke more about memories. Not regrets, but moments. Small ones. Cooking late at night, fixing broken toys, waiting up during storms. He spoke as if arranging them gently, making sure nothing important was forgotten. The siblings listened, understanding that these stories were gifts. One evening, as the sun set softly, he thanked them again. Not with heavy emotion, but with calm certainty. He told them they had already repaid him many times over. After that, his strength faded gradually. There was no fear in it, only acceptance. When the time came, it was quiet. The house felt empty afterward, but not broken. Grief came in waves. Some days were heavy. Others were light. The siblings leaned on each other, just as they always had. They kept the house the same for a while. Familiar spaces brought comfort. The car remained parked outside. People came to offer support. Stories were shared. Many spoke about how the father had helped them without expecting anything in return. How he had listened when no one else did. How he had chosen kindness over ease. The siblings realized then that his legacy reached far beyond their home. Weeks later, they made a decision together. They would keep the workshop going, not as a business, but as a place of learning. They would continue what he started in their own way. The car was not sold. Instead, it stayed. It became part of their story. Sometimes they sat inside it, remembering. Sometimes they laughed about its stubbornness. Sometimes they were simply grateful it existed. Years passed, the siblings built lives of their own, always connected by what they shared. The lessons their father taught them guided every choice they made. Kindness first. Patience always. Purpose over pride. The house remained a place of warmth, and the old car, damaged and imperfect, stood as a silent witness to everything love can return. The story did not end with loss. It continued with meaning. Life after loss does not announce itself. It arrives quietly, asking to be lived again. The siblings learned this slowly. Some mornings felt heavy. Others felt light. There were days when memories brought smiles, and days when they brought tears. Both were welcome. The house changed in small ways, not because they wanted to erase the past, but because life kept moving. A chair was moved closer to the window. Old tools were cleaned and arranged neatly. The kitchen remained the same. It carried too many memories to change. They kept the routines their father loved. Morning tea, evening walks, quiet dinners when words were not needed. These habits connected them to him more than any photograph could. The workshop became something special. Word spread slowly and naturally. People came not just to learn skills, but to find calm. The siblings did not try to control it. They let it grow the way their father would have wanted. Patiently, sometimes young people asked about the man who started it all. The siblings told stories about a man who fixed things carefully, who listened fully, who chose love even when it cost him comfort. The car remained parked outside the house. Weather passed over it. Sun faded its paint further. Rain softened the dust. It did not move often. It did not need to. One afternoon, a neighbor suggested selling it, said it was worth something now, given the story attached to it. The siblings exchanged a look and gently refused. Some things were not meant to be turned into value. Years went by, the siblings grew older. Their lives expanded. They faced challenges of their own. Whenever life felt confusing, they returned to the lessons they were taught. Slow down. Be honest. Choose people. On certain evenings, they sat near the car, sharing quiet moments. Sometimes they spoke to their father as if he could hear. Sometimes they sat in silence, feeling close anyway. The story of the damaged car became something people shared, not as a miracle, but as a reminder. That love has a way of returning what was given, though not always in the form expected. One day, the siblings realized something surprising. They were at peace. Not because everything was perfect, but because they had learned how to live fully with what they had, just like their father did. The car remained, the lessons remained, and the love remained. Some stories do not end. They continue in the choices people make every day. As more time passed, the siblings began to understand something their father once tried to teach them without words. Life does not need constant excitement to be meaningful. It needs honesty. It needs care. And it needs people who show up even on ordinary days. They kept the house open. Not formally, not announced. People simply knew they could stop by. Old neighbors came for tea. Young people from the workshop came for advice. Some stayed only a few minutes. Others stayed for hours. No one was turned away. The siblings noticed how often their father's habits lived through them. One fixed things slowly instead of rushing. The other listened fully instead of interrupting. These small actions carried his presence more strongly than memories ever could. The car remained outside, unchanged. Children passing by sometimes asked why it never moved. The siblings smiled and said it had already traveled far enough. On quiet mornings, they cleaned it gently. Not to restore it, but to respect it. Dust was wiped away. Leaves were cleared. It stood like a quiet marker of everything that came before. The workshop continued to grow, not in size, but in meaning. People who learned there went on to help others. Skills passed hand to hand. Patience passed heart to heart. The siblings realized their father's influence was spreading in ways he never could have imagined. One evening, while sorting through old boxes, they found a small notebook. Inside were simple notes, measurements, reminders, small thoughts written during late nights. On the last page, a single line stood out. It said that choosing people over profit was never a mistake. They closed the notebook carefully. The years shaped them gently. They faced loss, joy, mistakes, and forgiveness. Each challenge was met with the lessons they were given long ago. Sometimes, they wondered if the story of the damaged car would ever stop being told. They realized it didn't matter. What mattered was how it shaped those who heard it. The siblings grew older, but they never grew distant. The bond they shared was too strong, built from shared survival, shared love, and shared purpose. One afternoon, a young person asked them why their father never chased more, never tried to become something bigger. The answer was simple. He already was. The car stayed. The house stayed. Warm, and the lesson stayed clear. That sometimes, the most life-changing gifts arrive looking broken. And sometimes, the richest lives are built by those who give without expecting anything back. Life has a way of settling into meaning when people stop chasing noise. For the siblings, the later years were not about building something new, but about protecting what already existed. The values their father lived by became the quiet rules guiding every decision they made. The house aged, just like they did. Paint peeled in places. Floors creaked more loudly, but nothing felt neglected. Every repair was done with care, not urgency. The home carried history, and history deserved patience. They often spoke about their father in simple ways. Not as someone special or heroic, but as someone steady. Someone who showed them how to live without bitterness. Someone who proved that love did not need recognition to matter. The workshop remained open. Not every day. Not on a strict schedule. But whenever someone needed guidance, people came from different places, carrying different struggles. Some needed skills. Others needed someone to listen. The siblings offered both, just as they had once received. The car still stood outside. Rust spread slowly. The tires softened with time. Yet no one suggested removing it anymore. It had become part of the landscape, like a tree that once offered shade. People respected it without needing explanation. On certain days, the siblings sat inside it together. They did not start the engine. They did not need to. They talked about their lives, their doubts, their hopes. The space felt safe, familiar, honest. They realized something important in those moments. The car was never about what was hidden inside. It was about what it revealed. It revealed how deeply love could shape destiny. How sacrifice did not erase opportunity, but delayed it until it could return with purpose. How a man who chose children over comfort never truly lost anything. Years passed quietly. The siblings grew into elders themselves. Their hair grayed, their steps slowed. Yet the lessons remained sharp. When asked what guided them most in life, they gave the same answer every time. Choose people, choose patience, choose kindness. Even when it cost something, they watched new generations grow. Some never knowing the full story, only feeling its effects. And that was enough. One evening, as the sun lowered gently, the siblings stood together near the car. The air was still. The moment felt complete. They did not feel loss. They felt gratitude. Gratitude. For a man who changed their lives without ever trying to impress the world. Gratitude for a gift that once seemed broken, but carried everything that mattered. Some stories end with answers. This one ended with understanding. And that was more than enough.